Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Big Resilience Reset Part 4. My name is Marcus Vaughan. I'm the co-founder and chief growth officer at Illumina, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome back to the Big Resilience Reset, which is without a doubt my favorite webinar in the resilience industry. Joining with me today are two of my very good friends and special guests that we typically do have on this amazing webinar. We have James Green from Illuminate Advisory. James, welcome back.
Thank you, Marcus. Thanks for having me back.
And none other than the Chief Resilience Officer of Asphalis Advisors, Vanessa Vaughan-Matthews, who I'd also go to say is a powerhouse in the resilience industry. It is fantastic to have you back again, Vanessa. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone.
And that is very much the case. It is a good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We've got a really interesting session ahead of us today. And as per always, we've got a fantastic turnout from the resilience industry. We had just on 200 professionals registered for today, which is really good. But the representation is from around the world. We've got 16 countries represented today. Massive turnout from the US. So thank you everyone for dialing in. I know it's 4 p.m. on the Eastern coast right now. We've had Australia, UK, Canada, New Zealand, Germany, Czech Republic, France, Hong Kong, India, Malaysia, Poland, Spain, Taiwan, Uganda, and the UAE. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's dialed in for this. And then there's everyone who dialed in using a Gmail address. So we don't know where you're from, but you're people of the world, as Google is everywhere, as we know. For those who haven't attended before, this is very much a no holds barred discussion about what's happening at the moment in the world and how that applies for, I guess, a resilience professional and our industry. So it's a very much an open conversation. There's going to be a lot of opinions thrown around today. The only thing I would say is please be respectful with your questions, but feel free to throw questions into the chat. We're going to be keeping an eye on that. I can see everyone's in there already. Telling us where you're coming from. That's a fantastic way to get started. The chat function in this webinar is about as lively as the panel. It's a pretty exciting place to go into. So please do throw in your thoughts, your opinions, your questions. That very much makes up part of the session as well. The session is recorded, so we will be able to get access to this. So if you've got colleagues who might find that useful to dial into later on, and you can also relive your favorite moments later on. It's an exciting thing to be part of. We'll get that out to you in the next few days as well. So please, if you're coming back again for the second, we know we've got a really good part of our audience here that has dialed in for every session so far. So I just want to say thank you and welcome back. It's always great to have these conversations and really focus on trying to move our discipline forward. To get started, we're going to talk about the economic environment because it's creeping up and there's a lot going on at the moment. So it goes without saying, it doesn't matter which country you fly to at the moment, we're all feeling the bite of inflation. I certainly felt it when I was over in the US last time I was over there, and we're about to go over again for DRJ. Inflation in the US is about 9.1% at the moment. UK, it's 8.8, but I was reading an article with Goldman Sachs has pegged that to be over 20% in the next 6 months, largely due to the gas price situation on their hands. Australia, relatively speaking, pretty low at 6.1%. It's weird to say that. Canada's at 7.6, Europe's at 8.9, New Zealand's at 7.3% inflation. We're all feeling the pinch of this, and it goes without saying every economist around the world at the moment is predicting a global recession. So we're going to experience a contraction. It almost feels all but inevitable in the next 6 to 12 months. So the question mark I've got really to get us started is the resilience profession recession proof? James.
Nice. You always throw nice, easy questions to me. No. We are no longer recession proof. I think the last recession, big recession that us old folks in the US lived through, the 2008 economic downturn, meltdown, Great Recession, pick your term. There was kind of a thinking at the time that a lot of resilience professionals and a lot of resilience functions at organizations were recession proof because companies needed those functions and management felt they needed those functions no matter what. But the problem is the last 2 years, companies have not leaned heavily, unfortunately, a lot of organizations have not leaned heavily on their resilience professionals. So if I don't need you during the biggest pandemic, the biggest business continuity incident in the last 100 years, I'm probably not going to need you during a recession, honestly. So if you were not seen as valuable the last 2 years, you're in trouble. You're going to be on that list of, hey, if we got to make cuts, 10%, 5%, 20%, your name's going to be on that list. And yes, Mark, I did just call you and myself old. So
I'm laughing at Mark's comment. Hey, Mark.
Yes. I'm just saying, if you're 20 years old, you're like, hey, it didn't affect me then. So he called most of us old. Yes, fair enough. We can go way back. I can talk about when we had high gas prices in the 70s, like how far back you want to go. But my point is, we have seen the value of a lot of resilience professionals diminish, and that's going to hurt when companies look to make cuts. And I'm already seeing that with some companies now, and they're planning their 2023 budget, and they continue to forecast rising costs and where they've got to trim. I'm seeing some areas up for debate that have not been previously.
Yeah. Vanessa, what are your thoughts on this?
I would echo. So I do believe that our profession is recession proof, to the caveat that James provided, depending on how you performed in COVID and how much they leaned on you, how much they pulled, how much value you added, or how much you were able to help the organization to rethink what they were experiencing in the past couple of years. So I do it. And it's so funny because yesterday I was having a conversation with a friend about, in our profession, we keep talking about the same things. And so we will not be recession proof if we do not continue to evolve, right? I can't name a product or a business that has not evolved that is COVID proof or recession proof. So our profession is no different. So we have to continuously evolve. And I think we've got to get to a place where, and I'm going to say this, I'm probably going to upset a couple folks, but we got to get to a place where we stop asking how do we get buy-in? Like, I think that should be something that goes away in 2023. Like in the COVID timeframe that we've had here, we said, you can no longer say, this is the way that we've always done it. That has been retired since COVID, because it showed us that, yes, we can change and things can drastically change. For our profession, we need to stop saying, I can't get buy-in. That we've got to retire that, and we've got to find a new problem that we're having. Because for the past 15 years that I've been in this industry, it's the same old, same old. And those are the things that I think can get us into trouble.
Yeah, that's an interesting point though, because it does keep coming up. Like it comes up literally every time we ask a question about what are some of the skill sets that and some of the things that you need to accomplish within your resilience program. And hey, I need to be able to influence the CISO now, or the C-suite. Pick any member of the C-suite. I think, Vanessa, the question I've got with that is, do we have a fundamental grassroots training issue on our hands for some of those softer skills like influence, to try because we're still having the same conversation 15 years on. Like what's not changed there? Because if you look at, and one of the observations I have is like, there's a lot of chief risk officers. So the risk profession seems to be under control from an influence perspective. There is a seat at the table etched in. There are not enough, and it's great that your title is Chief Resilience Officer. Lead by example, Vanessa. I love that. But I don't come across many Chief Resilience Officers in my day-to-day workings with organizations large and small.
Absolutely. I'm with Alice. Stop making excuses. So a couple thoughts there. So in thinking about soft skills and what are some of those things that professionals will probably need as we walk into and continue to go through the economic downturn that the US is already in my opinion, the skills haven't changed. We still need to be critical thinkers. We still need to be able to effectively communicate. We still need to know how to build relationships. So to me, those things haven't changed, but I do agree that from a professional development, soft skills perspective, our profession has not evolved in the manner that I think that it should have. So for example, we did a webinar a few weeks back, and it was the intersection of utilizing sales and risk and crisis management programs. And so we asked a group of professionals, what are your current programs when it comes to selling or getting buy-in for your program? And consistently, the responses were, they have challenges around money. They don't have authority within the organization. So where they sit from a title perspective, they don't have access to executives. So it's hard to get the ear. They don't have time with the decision makers. They lack the resources. They don't have enough experience within their own existing programs. They don't have communication techniques that support the financial investments that their program is doing for the organization. Some of them are struggling with leaders who want to take credit for their work. Some of them are challenged with instilling a sense of urgency. And so as I listen to those different concerns and challenges, what it tells me in my mind now as a business owner on the other side of the table, those are all things that I hear my chief risk, my chief security, my chief operations clients communicate as to why they need the service of continuity, resilience, whether it's technology or whether it's on the professional services side. And so it's concerning that as practitioners that we're having these challenges, but what's also interesting is those are the exact same challenges that your executives are trying to solve for. So I think from a professional development perspective, instead of just focusing on what I need to get my CBCP certification or my BCI certification, we need to take things a step or two steps further and think about specific soft skills that are needed in the roles that we play. I think it's also important that as we think about future professional development, our industry burns out quickly and hard. And once you get to that place in your career where you're done, many folks don't want to come back because of some of the scars and bruises that you get within emergency management and continuity. And I don't think that our certifications account for some of the other things that happen on the day-to-day within our roles that many of us have experienced before.
James, any additional thoughts on that?
I think being broken and damaged has helped me thrive in this profession. No, but seriously, you look at anyone who's in a C-suite, not CRO or risk or resilient, anyone, they have sold themselves on the way up the ladder. It's not because of their certifications. It's not because of their technical ability. You don't get promoted because you do the most beautiful BIAs. It's because you've been able to sell yourself and create value by selling the program of whatever program that you're running. Done project management, risk, resilience, EHS, who cares? We need to have, the people who have really risen to the top of this profession and any profession are at their heart able to sell themselves, sell the value of what they do. And that's the biggest miss I see with people who are in the middle of their careers trying to get to that top step.
There is, obviously, things have changed since the last major global recession, though. A lot of the processing, doing work as being a resilience professional should be slowly moving away so that the role should be a little bit more around influencing and going further up the value chain from that perspective. What do you think has changed since the last global recession? And shouldn't that be an opportunity for resilience practitioners to take that step up the value chain? And
yeah, I think
the importance.
I think historically, most resilience professionals have really clung to the tactical part of their job. It's like Gollum with the ring. You've got these 500-page plans, and this is what I do with my life. And you've got a green light from management right now that says, we don't want those. We don't need those. Do something else. You have to evolve from tactical to strategic if you want to have a successful career in any profession. And certainly in our profession, you don't become a chief resilience officer, chief risk officer, COO because of your tactical abilities. It's strategic. So I understand if you're in we've had some comments about regulated environment. Yeah, you have to crank out paper as an FI or you lose your bank charter. I get that. I would encourage you not to work in those fields. I don't anymore. But outside of that, are you strategic? Are you truly doing things that move the needle? percentage of plans updated this year does not move a needle. And frankly, like Vanessa said, after the pandemic, nobody cares anymore.
Vanessa, sorry, you I can see you want.
Go ahead.
No, is there something else you want to add to that?
The only thing that I wanted to add is, this is so timely. I was talking to a friend yesterday, literally, I have a lot of friends. And the conversation was around, she asked me, how am I able to communicate the value of what we do, right? We're a risk and resilience company with as follows. And I told her, I said, what's interesting is while I have, X amount of years in this profession, that's not really what I talk about when I'm on the phone with the client. I leverage what I know in business continuity and crisis management to help them see and understand risk in a very simple way. Because to my clients, emergency management, business continuity, and crisis management, although those are three separate statements or phrases, to them, it means the exact same thing. So they could care less about how we get bogged down at conferences about, oh, it's operational resilience or versus technical recovery. That is insignificant and not adding any value to our clients. And so I do think that in terms of soft skills, moving from tactical to strategic, another component that I think is critical is we have to dial in on the pains. And I know this because we've done it in our own business. The moment that we start to focus more on why am I here? Why is this role created? Why did you hire for this position? Why are you making updates to executive leadership team on X activity? The moment we start going back to pain and what we're here to do, the more we can focus more on strategic. And I also think it's about being bold and asking some of the tough questions. And I'm sure we'll get into this later, but outside of the economic downturn, there's a lot going on in the world, right? And I do feel like that we have an opportunity to start asking more bold questions because our job is really to help them think. That's it. Who's going to be bold enough to ask the right questions to help you think differently about how you're sizing up your risk portfolio and what that means in the marketplace?
So I've got a question for you that goes on from that, Vanessa. And you're probably going to give me a very biased answer because you're in a consultancy. But should every resilience practitioner learn to be a consultant before they become a practitioner, to have that, to build the skill set of having to sell resilience to an organization and an executive team? Because it doesn't matter whether you sit inside or outside a company, the job is still the same.
Yeah. So, well, first, let me say I started a consulting business and had never been a consultant. So don't do what I did. I didn't know what right looked like until I figured out what wrong was. So, which I guess is a way to learn. So I would actually say there's two things that I would recommend. I don't know if I would say, become a consultant. I think that there are attributes of a consultant that everyone can find value in. But number one, it's about, so in our business, we're building a customer-centric business. I'm only in business to solve my clients' problems. The moment I stop solving their problems, I am out of business. You are no different. So what is the problem of your customers? And your customers as a practitioner might be internal to the business or external. So I think we as a industry have to get narrowly focused on the problems that my clients need me to help them solve. I think that's number one. I think number two, it goes back to what James and I were just, talking about. You have to recognize that you're in sales. And the reason why I'm going to harp on this is because I have candidates, I have team members, I have clients who say, I don't do sales. That's not my role. I know practitioners who think sales is not me. That's not what I do. I am technology. I'm behind the scenes. I'm an introvert. Like I told our team, when I hired you, that's because you sold me. I had a problem and you told me that you can meet my problem. And then when I brought you in the first 90 days, I was evaluating if who I interviewed was who I got, because we're always in an interview, right? But everybody is responsible for sales. You're selling yourself. When you come to a conference, if you walk out of a room, if you come in the room, if you're late, you're early, you're selling me something, whether you know it or not. And so I think we have to get rid of this mindset that, oh, I'm not a sales executive or a sales, or I didn't go to school to study sales. Even your children are in sales. Every time they ask, can I go to the movies? That's sales. Like, so those would be the two things: customer centric and understanding that you are in sales and you will always be in sales until you are laying horizontal on this earth.
I couldn't agree more. I think if you have a problem with the word sales, switch it out for influence, and you'll understand it really quickly. Like, it's the same thing. James, anything else you want to add to that before we keep rolling?
Yeah, I think two things that people miss on as an employee: you are always being evaluated. People only think around the times of performance reviews or when there's a position open for promotion. You're being evaluated in every meeting, every day, 24/7. And that's one thing I think people miss. They don't focus or realize that I've had big teams in the past. Every interaction I have with my employees, I'm evaluating some aspect. The other thing is, when you get time with senior executive leadership, you may not get that time again. So again, if you have 1 minute with the risk committee or 2 minutes with the CEO and you're talking about stuff they don't care about, you won't get back into that room again. You need to use that time very wisely. And if you blow it once, you never recover. So I've always tried to use that time when I'm in front of a CEO or a senior executive. What is most important to them that I can speak to that relates to my agenda? And yes, I always have an agenda. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm always trying to promote my program, promote my clients, whatever. You should always be focused on, how do we move towards success?
Yeah.
Yes. So to James's point, I was reading the McKinsey Mind the other day and the McKinsey Way. So for some of you who are putting comments in the chat, I totally agree that there's a lot of skill sets that consultants have that are of value. If you want to hone in on that more, the McKinsey Mind and the McKinsey Way are great tools. But James, that is so critical of what you said. I have an agenda because I know when I show up for a meeting, how I'm going to spend my time. One of my coaches told me a long time ago, your C-suite executives, pick a company, they're accustomed to an agenda. They're accustomed to a timed agenda. They're accustomed to a follow-up. They're accustomed to immediate action steps and knowing what you need them to do and what you don't need them to do. And so he told me, if you don't operate in what they consider as normal, you are impacting their experience and they're not going to like it. They need you to mold to what's normal. And one of our clients told us that we were the only vendor that he would allow to have meetings with the C-suite when he wasn't in the room, because we know how to run a meeting. And it's about communicating ahead of the meeting. And it's small things. So I was reading the McKinsey Mind and I'm thinking I'm going to pull a whole bunch of nuggets. And some of their basic concepts were: send out the agenda 24 hours in advance, send a thank you note, and just be consistently consistent with that. And it's amazing how much it impacts your reputation, your brand, but also how people trust you and respect you as a key stakeholder. And so I don't think some of this stuff is rocket science. It's really just business practices that maybe we haven't pulled on some of those levers in a while.
Yeah. I think that's very sound advice. There's a question mark in the chat there around this maybe not being very considerate of a bad day. What does this look like when you're building preparedness and influencing ahead of game day versus game day? I mean,
we're not allowed to have bad days. We have bad days, people die. I mean, let's be honest. We don't have, if you want to be in a profession where there's the luxury of bad days, you're in the wrong profession. It's very hard to, people in our profession who I see have bad days are then pursuing other interests and they're no longer with the company. So it's not a luxury we have. The one fail-safe you have, if you build trust with people, if they see value in what you do, you will get a pass from time to time. But the more strategic you are, the more passes you're going to get. The more tactical you are, the more easily replaceable you are from a perception standpoint. So again, if all you're doing is tactical work and you have a bad day, you're going to be in trouble.
And what do we think this looks like in terms of building up that influence to deal with a bad day, as opposed to what it feels like in the room, in the tent, on game day, when the company's having a very bad day?
Well, you better hope that people trust and respected you before game day. And again, did you bring value to the business, not from risk and resilience only, but are you looked at as, here's someone who contributes to this organization overall? Or are you just the person who hides in their cubicle and wanders out once a year to update documents?
Vanessa, we talk about having that seat at the table.
So look, I have a question, and I can't be the only person that has this question. Can we define what a bad day is? Just so I'm on the same page. Roderick, I
look at that like game day.
You said game day?
I always call it game day.
Okay.
As in like critical event day, everything's going wrong.
Yeah, I think that's when you shine. That's game day. So now we're in football season, right? My favorite team is the Falcons. Win, lose, or draw, I'm still going to be an Atlanta Falcons fan. Please talk trash in the chat only. But I say that to say, whether the quarterback is having a good day or not, they got to come out and play the game and execute. And I think another component is Super Bowl teams don't run the same plays from the previous year. You got to come up with new plays. You got to come up with new strategies. So we can't get to a place of complacency. Well, this worked the past 2 years in COVID. Okay, well, now we have monkeypox, more COVID, economic downturn. There are factors in the environment that were not there 2 years ago. So how do we stop running the same plays and run new plays?
That's good.
I think we lost Marcus with all of our American football analogies. So he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but yeah, it sounds good.
That's good. I mean, because we often talk about, do you have a seat at the table? And that's not just obviously, what you do before game day in training season, obviously sets you up for game day. So I think, we've spoken about that at length, which ties into influence, which ties into sales skills. I think the question mark I've got here is, if we don't get the soft skills right to get all these points of influence right to build up our next generation of resilience practitioners, do we have a risk of the profession being a sunsetting profession if we don't actually invest systematically across the profession into these soft skill development?
Yes, the short answer is yes. Because the reality is, going back to this earlier, right? I've never seen a business continue to stay open that hasn't evolved, i.e. Blockbuster, i.e. Kmart. If you're not evolving, then you're dead. Or what I could see is our profession is totally event driven. So to your point, now we're in a downturn. It's kind of like training. We don't need them. Let's lay them off. Oh, now we're coming up to flu season. Okay, now let's ramp up again and let's hire some BCP people. Let me put a plug in a hole until it bursts, and then we lay them off, and then, let's come back because now we're in hurricane season or fire season. It can be very event driven if we're not careful. And I do think that another call out that we need to add here is that as a collective industry, and partly because we are siloed even within our small profession, we are not doing a great job of taking our own medicine and building our own continuity within the profession. We're just not doing it. We might be doing it company by company in terms of how you may or may not hire and how you support or grow or develop your workforce. But as a collective, as an industry, it would be great to see a strategic plan for how we're going to continue to evolve our field. And what does it look like? And what are the things that should change? Like, I've never been to a RIMS conference. I know risk management people who've never been to a business continuity conference. Should that change? Should we start doing more things at cybersecurity conferences or with chief safety and security officers? Why within the risk management umbrella, why is risk, safety, security, continuity, crisis management in its own pillar, but yet these are the exact same things that we advise companies not to do, but we do it anyway?
Exactly. And that's where when I go to RIMS or as is, GSX or B-sides, that's where I learn the most. And, there's a lot more out there. And I think Vanessa's totally right that, we talk about, two is one and one is none and single points of failure with our organizations. But then when we look at our profession, we're going down that same path.
Yeah. Any thoughts on how we change that, guys? Or is that's a big conversation we'll have at DRJ this year?
I mean, how much time you got?
Well, okay.
How much trouble can we get into right now?
Look, since you went there.
All right, here we go. Marcus, open this door, everyone.
So, okay, I would love for the audience to share in the chat. What's one idea you have of how we can break down, I'll use Alice's words, these professional walls. But here's my opinion. Who pays the conferences?
More people like Marcus.
Sponsors.
Vendors and sponsors.
Company. Right. So if you're in this chat and your company has provided a sponsorship payment to the conference, you're a part of the problem.
Yep.
Because if you don't set requirements, expectations, and drive accountability, then we're going to keep getting the same old thing. But your money is green and you can spend your money anywhere. So if you come to the next conference and say, hey, I'm going to put down 50,000, 20,000, pick a number. But here's what I want to see. Then we start to affect change. But until then, they're going to take your money and they're going to be glad. And if you don't even give them a course of direction or going back to the topic of diversity, we want to see more BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color on stage. How do we do that? If all of my sponsors look the same, sound the same, come from the same, and none of my sponsors are bringing in diverse candidates, then how are we ever going to see change at the professional conferences? So it is the responsibility of the conferences and the sponsors. So when you look and see who sponsored this conference and you see vendors and suppliers whom you hire at your companies, how about as a buyer, how about you start having a different conversation?
I think we all just.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to get the next generation of resilience professionals if we have frankly, people who look like me. If you have middle-aged white men on the agenda as the speakers, as the sponsors, but you say, where is everyone else? It's not going to work. And sponsors have the biggest, fastest lever, because if 5 sponsors at the next conference that we all go to told the conference organizer, hey, here's how we want things to go, the answer is going to be absolutely, because they need your money. And we can affect change as participants. We vote with our dollars as well. If people stopped attending a certain conference en masse, I guarantee the agenda, the speakers, the format, anything would change to stay in business. A conference's goal is to stay in business, just business continuity, right? And we're not demanding or driving change, I think, at the attendee level, the sponsor level, or the exhibitor level.
Well, and to add on to that, James, going back to influence. So depending on where you are in the organization. So let's say you say, well, I'm not a C-suite, so I don't have influence. How can you leverage this discussion right now to leverage your influence? Because you do have influence. If you're a subject matter expert and you've got 2-3 levels ahead of you in your company, but yet you work with companies so-and-so and they provide your technical recovery or resilience recovery, you literally are in the best position to approach your sponsor about differences that you want to see at conferences. And even though your title may not be that of a leadership member or an executive member, the fact that you're wearing the corporate brand who's cutting your vendor a check is how you can influence. And so it goes back to what we said earlier, who's going to be bold enough to start asking the questions and saying the things that need to be said for us to see change in our profession?
Okay, well, I'm going to do something live right now because I am a platinum gold sponsor for a conference coming up. I'm going to type into the chat, I want to see more of the following at the next resilience conference. Should probably spell conference right. And then everyone's going to respond with what they want to see more at the next conference. I'm going to pull the data and I'm going to share that to the organizers at DRJ We're also sponsoring BCI, so we're going to do the same thing for BCI. We can do that live. We do spend money at these conferences, so if there's something we can influence, let's hear the brains trust of the Big Resilience Reset and the couple of hundred people we have registered here. Put in your thoughts of what you want to see at the next conference, guys. I'm going to let that run for a second. I think that's great points, Vanessa, as always. So thank you very much. We might keep rolling though. So everyone, drop your thoughts in terms of what you want to see at the next conference. We'll pull the data from this chat because we do record everything, and we'll hand that over to the DRJ organizers for food for thought around shifting this in the right direction for our own profession. So so knock yourself out. Like I said, no holds barred, guys. Okay. Well, that was a good way to get started, and we're 37 minutes in already. Okay, so if we're not connected on LinkedIn, we should be connected on LinkedIn because we're all part of the same ecosystem here. So so a job for anyone who's not connected to James, Vanessa, on LinkedIn, go and search us up right now, jump on. The reason I say that, we had a great poll because when we were originally talking about the Big Resilience Resets, we should probably actually take some thoughts down from the industry around what they want to talk about, because this is a no holds barred discussion. A couple of things that came out, and we're gonna get into this in the small short of time that we have left. Two things came up: geopolitical risk. How do we manage geopolitical risk, which is obviously a big topic, and the other piece there is actually around dealing with spotting toxic jobs and cultures before we go into them. I might start with the toxic jobs and cultures piece because it probably does tie on from the whole fact that we've got an economic downturn. We might have a whole heap of roles changing, some churn coming, some people trying to hire, those jobs changing. See the chats taking off. That's great. So on that, if you're looking at different opportunities within the industry because you've had it with where you are, what are the things, what's your advice, guys? What should people be looking for or trying to spot the red flags for a job description that's written in a certain way, or a culture that's standing out? Maybe that's at interview mode, so that you don't walk yourself straight into a box that is not a great place to be. James?
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on this. There's a lot of crappy jobs out there in our profession. And don't take those jobs. First of all, I know that sounds pedantic, but you can spot the jobs that aren't going to be meaningful based on what they want you to do. Look at the job description. If the job description says update risk assessments, plans, and BIAs, and that's it, that's a tactical job. If you talk to the hiring manager and they're 58 levels down from the CEO, that's not a great job. Unless you're an entry-level person. Find out why the last person left. If they've had 6 people in 6 years, it's probably problematic. We don't have this as much anymore, but in-person interviews, I love going to a company now as a consultant, but before as an applicant. When people walk down the hall, do they look you in the eye? Does it feel like a prison? Right? Are people miserable? Because if they're miserable, you're going to be miserable. And, you know, when people, if everyone looks like they want to kill themselves or are waiting for 5 o'clock to escape, you're going to feel the same way. And I think people miss a lot of those cultural cues. You're focused on compensation and benefits and holiday and PTO, and you should be, but that's not the stuff that drives happiness. And that doesn't determine whether you have a meaningful job. I had a job recently in the last few years. You could certainly look it up on LinkedIn, although I'm not allowed to say their name. They paid me a stupid amount of money, and that job sucked. That was a terrible job. I'm so glad I'm not at that job anymore. That paycheck that you get, that big giant paycheck, that's exciting for one pay cycle. And then after that, you're like, oh, this job sucks. So if you're in a position to get paid more than what you're getting paid now, if that's the only reason you can come up with to take a job, don't take that job.
I just hope nobody's walking into prison every day. So what's interesting is when I was in corporate prior to leaving and running my own practice, when I got to my last corporate role, I could tell within 2 weeks that corporate was corporate, and I was not going to be at that company long. And my 3 reasons for leaving are probably what I pay attention to the most. It's culture, it's creativity, it's community. So Alice, put that in the chat. You interview just as much as they're interviewing you. But you could also see how they show up for the interview. How do they show up for your calls? How organized? How do they present? How prepared are they? View their social media. What do you see on their social media? Check out their lawsuits. When's the last time they've been sued? Have they had EEOC complaints? Who are they donating and giving dollars to? What employee reviews have you seen on Glassdoor and other sources? I was in a conversation, a training group a few weeks back, and an individual in this group mentioned that in an interview, they asked the employer, how do you respond to social issues that impact my demographic? What does equity and inclusion look like practically here on a day-to-day basis? What are your pain points as a hiring manager? And how is my role going to help solve that? What's the so what of my role? And I was just thinking like, wow, those are bold questions to ask in an interview. No one's ever asked me that, but I can almost imagine that you get to the real conversation, which I think is what needs to happen. I always talk about, let's just have a real conversation. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not surface level it. Let's get to the meat of the real conversation. And what is the real thing that we should be here discussing so we can get on with the get on? And I think it goes back to where can we be bold? We have an opportunity. How we spot things are our ability to ask the right questions, which is what we do well in our profession. We know how to ask the right questions to uncover risk.
And right now, as applicants and potential hires, we have more leverage than we've ever had before. Prior to the pandemic, if you wanted to change jobs, you probably had to sell your house or move, or your spouse had to change jobs, or your partner had to change jobs, or you had to pull your kids out of a school, or you had to figure out how you deal with, your elderly parents that you take care of. Now, with so many companies, especially in our profession, going remote, they just send you different business cards and a new laptop. And because of that, you have a lot more options to work in a lot of different areas than you ever had before. So you should use that authority and ask those bold questions that Vanessa said, because you have the ability to do so. It is a buyer's market for applicants in ways that I've never seen before.
Yeah. Do we think that's going to change? So if unemployment in the US goes from 3.5 to 6% in the next 12 months, do we think that a lot of the ground that's been made from an employee's perspective to have flexibility and the ability to work hybrid or remote, do you guys foresee that to actually have an impact on the buyer's market and the ability to pick and choose the opportunities that come to you?
In my opinion, so we're in the middle of doing human resources audits for a few of our clients in retail, and retail has it's almost like healthcare. It's frontline. It's just the nature of the business model is what it is. Yeah. This client is paying attention to labor data, the economy, and what employees want. And the data shows that we're going to be in this employee mix for a while where they will likely be the ones that are driving the market. So our clients, we told them, you are 50% more profitable than what you thought you would be. Let's stop being greedy. Take those profit margins and invest it in your business and in your people specifically. Give them what they need access to. Give them more time. Give them stipends towards gas. Give them support for childcare, because let's be clear, you don't have a business if you don't have people. So I believe that most companies, especially clients that we're working with, and I would caveat this by saying when there's a good leader at the top who cares about people first and who understands that, I think those companies will follow and they'll make the investments in their people. I think on the other coin, we'll see those who are focused on profit first, we'll see something different.
Yeah.
You know, another thing I just thought of that I think a lot of applicants don't focus on with companies that they're considering working for. What's the profit margin of the company? What's the profit margins of the industry that company's in? I was the head of BC for a company that worked on very thin margins. Everything was understaffed. Everything was under-resourced. It wasn't about, we don't care about BC or resilience. They just ran lean. And then I went to a company that had stupid high margins, and it was much easier to get budget. It was much easier to get headcount because that was kind of the company culture. Like, hey, we have more cash to play with.
Yeah. A lot of comments there that work from home.
Someday, Mark.
Someday, Mark. Hybrid's here to stay. It certainly struck me. And again, the last trip I did across the US, I think there's only 5 to 10% occupancy in literally every office I've walked through, which was an interesting insight. And a lot of practitioners talking to over there is the organization's really struggling to get people back in the office. I think the question Mark I threw at one of them was, well, who cares? Like, are we being effective? But is that one of those, is that a red flag if you go for a job and they say, because the unemployment rate's gone up, hybrid's gone, yeah, you've got to come in
Yeah, I think so. I had a company reach out to me last month and they're like, hey, can you just we're having trouble filling this position. We're a really progressive company and we need a BC resilience leader, blah, blah, blah. And I noticed the first thing was they were requiring the person to reload to their headquarters. And right away I said, you're a global company. You have incidents around the globe 24/7. Why does the person have to move to Podunkville? There's no way. That should be a huge red flag. I'm not talking about a small or regional company that has 90% on site, but there's several, you can look them up. There's several very high profile BC jobs open right now that have been open for 120 days. And all 3 of those jobs require the person to be where the mothership is. And I think especially, and I've always thought in our industry, if it's 2 a.m. and I'm running an incident, it doesn't matter where I am. And if it's on the other side of the world, it really doesn't matter where I am. And so for companies who say they're progressive, that are global in nature, but require reload, they're not progressive. They're just saying that because they're trying to do what they think the market wants them to do right now, but they're not progressive at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we spoke about a bit this, I think it was the last big resilience reset, maybe the one, I don't know, they're all a big blur now, but that ability to influence face to face and the water cooler discussions, sitting outside the executive's office and getting face time, all those things. Like, is there a balance there between, hey, I've got nothing against hybrid. I'm the only person in Illumina sitting in Brisbane right now. But is there benefits to making sure, even if you are hybrid, that you're getting the appropriate level of face time in with your business?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I am that company that I do not like the fact that my entire team is 100% virtual and we're in 7 different states and 4 different time zones. I hate it because I'm a dinosaur. I hate technology. I hate social media. I hate all of it. But I can't be that way.
You're very progressive for a dinosaur, Vanessa.
I know, right? However, because I am letting go of things that I don't like, I've been able to expand the expertise and the quality of the individuals that now work with our team. And I would not have been able to get that quality in Charlotte. Specifically the work that we do, it's very hard to recruit for our talent in Charlotte, North Carolina. Shout out if you're hiring, shameless plug, go to my website right now and go look at those jobs. But I would say that in the last resilience reset, we did talk about the need for people to be in person. I highly would say, especially as a professor, entry-level candidates need to be in the office because there is something about professionalism. It's something about looking somebody in the face. It's something about knowing how to sit in a meeting, how to not be distracting, how to show up on time. It's not normal for you to wear a shirt and tie with pajama pants. It's not normal for you to walk into a meeting at 9:01 because in the
what are you
real
saying
world,
right now? What are
don't
you
stand
saying?
up.
Did you just call me out? I think you just called us both out right now.
But in the real world, you've got to learn, goes back to the soft skills. And the problem is, especially our Gen Z, we don't have soft skills yet because we're so into the phone. All I know is my phone. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to build relationships. I don't even know how to get the freaking meeting scheduled, which is why for entry-level candidates, absolutely, you should be in the office. Now, can it be hybrid? Absolutely. But they need to be in the office. I don't think I would be comfortable hiring a candidate who is an entry-level candidate who's never worked in the office. For what we do and for the level of who we work with, you need to have that under control. And that only comes through having experience, which is being in the office. And this is coming from someone when I was 21 when I got into the field. And people would always say, oh, you cute little millennial like my daughter. And I'm like, yeah, I am her age. But it came from experience. It came from the Jameses and the Marks and the David Lindsteads and the Alices pouring that energy into me so that 10 years later, there's something of value and of quality and being able to sit down, shut up and listen and do things differently. Older candidates and folks who are more experienced, I think that there is a balance, but I do believe that you have to figure out how you can be visible. Even if you're not there, how are you sending a piece of value? What are you paying attention to get their attention? I mean, now, it's been, 2 years. COVID showed me that we can now do business in Hungary and Mexico and California and Oregon. I never had to go and fly and see those customers. Now we have accounts in those places, but I also had to figure out a way for how do I show up and how do I get them to see me even though I'm virtual?
Yeah, 100%. Balance, I think, is the key. Okay, I'm going to keep moving because we are 7 minutes.
We've got
left.
5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes, Marcus, and we are on question 2 of 7, I think. So.
We're doing well. It's always big. That's what we're here for. Geopolitical risk was one of those. There's some great questions that came out on that LinkedIn poll. We really only have time to talk about one of them. Geopolitical risk. So where do we start with this? We could start on a global level and we could zoom right into a US level if we really wanted to. So I think the question that's coming out is how do practitioners better manage geopolitical risk when this was once a international, something that an international resilience manager or working in a multinational probably had to think about, and now it's down to any organization that is spread across one or more states in any given. Have we got time for this question? James,
this is the question we talked about off camera in our prep meeting, and your marketing department said we can't talk about it, and now we're talking about it. So, I was in Chicago last week. I got some spicy cheddar popcorn. So let's talk about this really quick. If you have only dealt with U.S. business continuity, crisis management, and resilience, and political instability has always been over there, it's coming. It's coming for you. It's coming for us. Look at what's happened the last 2 years in terms of volatility, in terms of outrage, in terms of unrest. You had, which we're all aware of, things that are still rippling because of George Floyd and Taylor and other people who were murdered in, I think the best term I can use is very questionable circumstances is probably the nicest thing I could say. It's not what I really want to say, but we'll leave it there for now. You had civil unrest in the Capitol last January. You had the Department of Justice storm a former president's house 2 weeks ago. You have the Supreme Court of the United States making decisions, and they're going to be making more decisions. Honestly, if you look at the rulings that have happened recently, the Supreme Court has ruled that privacy is not protected under the Constitution, and what that means for the terms, the next docket, the cases that are on the next docket. We are going to see, I think, unrest in waves we have not seen in this country since the 60s. So if you're used to that's over there, or we haven't had to deal with that here. You're going to have to deal with this in the next 12 months. So you need to get your arms around this now. You need to be prepared for, we're seeing companies already say, well, I'm not going to operate in this state. I'm not going to operate in that state. We're going to close offices. We're going to lose customers. We're going to lay off people. It's going to get messy at a level in this country that most of us have not had to manage ahead of. So again, always about how do I get a seat at the table makes me want to vomit. If you're not talking to your leadership team now about these items, you're going to be when stuff is burning, when streets are closed down, and you're going to be back in that reactionary position. That's my 90-second speech.
Vanessa?
I think that's all I'm allowed to say right now. So I'm going to be quiet and,
Let me
and
give
eat my popcorn.
85 seconds. So great friend of mine, Raven Solomon, who spoke at DRJ's conference last year, she did a DEI ER segment that she does every Friday. And her question was all of the political things that James has talked about, the political risks. She talked about, is there space for them in corporate? Number one. And question number two is who should be owning those conversations? Is it diversity? Is it risk? Who is it? So I'm 100% in agreement that we cannot shy away from these conversations. I don't think that they're political. I think, well, some of them are political risks, some of them are social risks, but I think that regardless, we should be discussing it. The concern I have is where some of us sit politically, and then it prohibits us from being the people in the room to ask the right questions. However, if you're the person who says, I'm okay to be bold and I want to ask the questions, what do you do? What's the roadmap? My recommendation is nothing starts without a conversation, right? So have the conversation, ask the question that can start that conversation. I think another thing that we can do is look at what political risks can directly or indirectly impact your business and start to kind of play with that and see what that looks like. And then who in your company and who outside of your company is impacted by those risks. I could give you a lot more questions, but Marcus is kind of giving me the eye, so I'm going to wrap it up. But in short, to Mark's point, get out of your comfort zone and start asking questions, and let's get into conversations we haven't been asking before.
Yeah, no, that's all fantastic advice. And Vanessa, we've done too many of these together. You totally know when I'm when I'm trying to find a way. But no, that is excellent advice. I think it's the fact that it needs to be on the agenda, it needs to be objective, there needs to be ownership. I think are all really critical points, and I think Mark, I think you wrapped it up really nicely there. Get out of your comfort zone, and again, to Alice's point just now, actively listen. I think that's right. It's like take the blinkers off, take your position out of the equation for that. But we do have to wrap because we're at time, and I promise to not go over too much in these sessions. So I'm going to say a massive thank you to everyone who has joined today. We do a quick plug, obviously. Thank you, James, for putting on the swag. We've got a fair bit going on at the moment. As I mentioned before, we are headlining at DRJ Fall. So we've got a pretty busy week coming up. I think we literally have something each day, from a solutions track with PenFed on Sunday. We've got an operational resilience panel on Tuesday. And then James, Vanessa, and I are going to run the world's greatest microsimulation on stage on the Wednesday. We're going to try and microsimulate 400 plus people, whoever's in the crowd, on stage at DRJ on the Wednesday. So we have some really interesting sessions coming up. We look forward to seeing you all there. We also have a webinar coming up that we're going to be running in October around influencing a culture of resilience through engagement. So really focusing on the influence part of that. So again, if you're interested in building up real skills as opposed to soft skills, then please do join us for that session. Vanessa, anything you want to raise in terms of upcoming events from your side whilst we're here?
I will be in Arizona, so please come by and see me. And our podcast is going to have a booth this year.
Fantastic. James, it's the right color hat.
We are aiming for the general session that the three of us are doing to be the most interesting general session ever at DRJ. So this is either home run or strikeout big swing for the fences. I'm going to try and throw as many US sports analogies in there to confuse Marcus and Jules as possible. Hopefully we can see everybody there.
No, it is going to be a great session. We're doing something very different. It's going to be extremely interactive. So if you're in the audience, get ready to participate. There's no passengers on this ride. So as you've seen today, we don't have room for passengers even in our webinars. Guys, I want to say everyone who has joined today, thank you very much for your contribution. The chat channel, as always, has been out of control in a very good way. So thank you again. I'm going to tally the information that you provided through in terms of what you want to see at the next conferences. Well done. Thank you. Let's hope we can all be part of a small iteration of change at the very least. Vanessa, James, once again, amazing to have you on board today. I really appreciate your absolute considerate and very thoughtful insights from your experience. So thank you once again.
Thank you both.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Think big. The future needs you. See you next time.